Now, our top story today, pressures mounting on Chancellor Jeremy Hunt to deliver a voter-friendly budget in the middle of a recession.
We are joined now by our senior political commentator and nerd, Peter Cardwell, and political editor at Tortoise. Tortoise or Tortoise? I can't do it. Cat Neilan, thank you. Good morning, both. Cat, let's start with you. You've heard enough from him.
You just gave him that wonderful introduction.
I can confirm, by the way, that Nicola Thorp pays all her taxes in the UK.
Thank you.
But do you? Don't be silly. Cat, I sit here and I think, we were talking about it all morning, sort of impossible position. But my thing that I keep coming back to is, we seem to be hearing about policies now for the next 6 months of an administration that many people think is on its last legs. And you look at it and you think, even if they bring in stuff, it's not going to kick in too quickly. He's caught between the devil and the deep sea. My thing, and I keep saying it, is that I think people have wised up a lot more in this country. And I think that if they're given a tax cut, they'll go, yeah, but it's going to cost us in a year's time. And you're just trying to buy votes. I mean, I really do believe that.
I mean, there's a lot of Conservative MPs who've obviously been petitioning the Chancellor to cut taxes, not just for this budget, but previous budgets, because a lot of them do feel that it is a matter of survival for them. That said, it does feel a bit as though it's tinkering around the edges. It may well help some individual MPs to cling on, but it seems very unlikely that it's actually going to help the party as a whole stay in power. And to your point about the sort of short-term versus long-term, actually, it seems as though a lot of the money that he's going to be playing with is based on cutting future spending, so spending in the next government, which is likely to be a Labour government, rather than what's happening now. And that is, of course, a bit of playing around with the numbers, but in the hope that he'll be able to show that taxes are coming down in general for people. However, the tax burden is going up. People are very, very conscious of that. And, of course, the economy is still stagnating. Inflation is still going up higher than the target level. And all of that contributes to this sense that people are worse off now than they were a year, 18 months ago.
And, Peter, national debt, I believe, is at 98.2% of GDP. There's not a lot of room for Jeremy Hunt here to make significant tax cuts. Do we think there could be any surprises on Wednesday that we could predict?
Well, he's sort of got to find the money from elsewhere, and he said he's not going to borrow any more to cut taxes. And one of the 5 pledges that Rishi Sunak had was to pay down the national debt. So he's sort of constrained quite a lot. The wriggle room is pretty small. There will be some sort of rabbit out of the hat. Maybe it'll be on stamp duty. Liz Truss has been urging him to do that, as have lots of young people who can't get on the housing ladder. So we'll see what happens on Wednesday. But certainly Jeremy Hunt is under a lot of pressure. He has less fiscal headroom, extra money, basically, than he thought he would have about 30 billion. We think he's got about 12 billion. If he's got to find some more, well, then taxes may go up elsewhere. And a lot of people will come away from it thinking, hold on, you've raised taxes in certain areas. You've put taxes maybe on vapes, cigarettes, alcohol, maybe fuel as well. But actually you're cutting perhaps national insurance, which most people, well, working people pay, but a lot of pensioners don't. That's a big question as well. What giveaways does he have for pensioners who usually, not all the time, but as a group, tend to vote Conservative?
It's really interesting when you look back at when Sunak came to power, Cat, and he came up with these 5 pledges and he talked about, I'm going to do this differently from Johnson, and then he employed Gavin Williamson, and we know what's happened from that on, really, and it hasn't been a smooth ride at all. Those two made a point. He kept Hunt on that they were fiscal responsibility, none of the... We're worse off than we were 2 years ago.
Yes.
We are,
but a lot of that is external shocks. If you look at, obviously, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, that has forced up oil prices and a lot of other kind of food prices as well. The Liz Truss effect obviously felt very sharp at the time, but I think, kind of looking at it sort of 18 months out, it's probably had less of an impact than things like the Ukraine crisis. But as Peter says, Rishi Sunak made a big thing in his 5 pledges. 3 of his 5 pledges were about the economy. Only one of those has he hit halving inflation, and we all know that actually that's less to do with him and more to do with what the Bank of England has been doing in terms of interest rates. So has he failed the Prime Minister in your mind? Well, I mean, I think that it's difficult to say that he's succeeded. Obviously,
what a great answer.
Great answer.
You should be a politician.
Very good.
You should be a politician.
Has he failed? Well, I would say it'd be hard to say succeeded. That's brilliant. That's absolutely my favourite line all morning.
But this is the thing with the economy, is that you can always use a bit of smoke and mirrors and kind of, make things seem like, well, we've cut waiting lists. Well, have you really? We've managed to kind of bring debt down as a proportion of GDP. Or have you really?
Well, the classic thing is the processing of migrants. They say that's basically done. I mean, it's absolutely not done. But Kat's absolutely right. It is that question that Ronald Reagan posed in the 80s. Do you feel better than you did, as he put it 4 years ago, but as Labour can put it 14 years ago? That's all they have to ask. And the answer for most people is no.
And Peter, we spoke about this in the last hour. 71% of all voters hold the Prime Minister and the Chancellor responsible for Britain suffering negative economic growth.
And even more significant, 60% of Conservative voters feel the same way. So there isn't a lot of faith in the Conservative Party. And I think that actually feeds into a lot of the polling for the Conservatives. People say the Labour polling is soft, that actually people are not telling the truth. I think a lot of Conservative voters are not who say they're going to vote Conservative may not at the election.
I take Kat's point absolutely. We talked about the pandemic, we talked about the Ukraine war, but I think the British people are fed up with excuses from their politicians, and of course there are external things. It's the lack of honesty, really, and suddenly with 6 months to go to a potential election, they're raft of things every single day. I know it's my pet subject, because I haven't been a Sunak fan. He wanted the job, he did a deal with Suella Braverman to get the job, he knifed Boris Johnson to get the job. Do you think he's been metaphorically? I think, has he been a disappointment? Because nothing has seemingly got better.
I think he's been a real victim of circumstance. I think he has been a disappointment to the kind of PM that Rishi Sunak would have wanted to be.
Right.
But the fact is, he's been
a victim of circumstance.
A victim of circumstance. I think he's well. I mean, I'm not saying that he could have been bolder. It was really interesting actually on Friday. Friday was a fascinating one where I think we saw the real Rishi Sunak when he was talking about Islamism and he was talking about the threat of extremism to this country. But so many people saying, yeah, great. A lot of other people saying, hold on a second, mate. Why are you saying this now? You've been Prime Minister for a year and a half. This has been a problem for
some of it.
I made the point about
enabled some of it.
I made the point about Gavin Williamson absolutely deliberately, because he strode up to Downing Street after the debacle and the chaos and said, I'm going to do things differently, I'm going to be open, I'm going to be honest. And he employed Gavin Williamson, who he had to sack within 4 weeks. And to me, from that very first moment, maybe he is better than he's shown, but he's had 2 years. And as you said, Kat, most people in this country would go, we're worse off, we're not better off.
I think the problem that Rishi Sunak has is that his political instincts aren't particularly strong. He's only been an MP since 2015.
Yep.
And although he talks about being a fiscal conservative quite a lot, especially when he was Chancellor, the environment that he's been operating in hasn't really allowed him to sort of be that.
Basically a socialist during lockdown, giving away many millions of
people to stay at home.
Exactly, yeah.
And Kat, what would Labour do differently?
Well, this is the big question. And of course, one of the policies that we think that is going to be unveiled on Wednesday is this tightening up of the non-dom status. So that is one of Labour's policies already being taken by the Conservatives. We've seen that in the past with some of the childcare provision as well. So they are almost as boxed in as the Conservatives. And if the Conservatives do reduce borrowing in the future spending plan in order to fund some of the tax cuts now, that will further hinder what they're able to do. So it'll be interesting to see what they come out with. In sort of previous autumn statements and budgets, it's been more of a kind of vibes response than an actual tangible policies response. Partly that's because they're conscious that that the Conservatives could well nick their ideas, as they have done. Partly it's because there isn't really much they can do. It's
really interesting. I was thinking about America and that great thing after when Trump left the White House, he and Biden, they leave in complete chaos. I always thought we were better, but you remember how many years ago it was when Liam Byrne left that message saying there's no money left. And you wonder whether, us, the people that vote, should demand better than governments with a few months to go who will give away something just to basically, with the greatest respect, screw up the next administration. But that can actually happen in this,
I think a lot of this will be.
And I think that's not good for the British people, is it? Yeah,
Liam Byrne was so unpopular at the Treasury, his nickname was Voldemort.
Was it really?
Yeah, it was Voldemort, yeah.
But I mean,
you're right,
a turnaround that Liam Byrne left a message and was ridiculed. There's no money left.
Yeah.
It's probably the same now, isn't it?
Well, I think there's going to be a lot front-loaded, as they call it, in this budget. I think there'll be a lot of good things or tax cuts or whatever for the next year, and then the real spending problems will be in a few years' time, because Jeremy Hunt thinks do a bit of a giveaway now. Maybe people who vote Conservative will deal with it if we're still there in a few years' time, but the likelihood is that they won't be.
Let's see what happens on Wednesday. Thanks, Peter Cardwell and Cat Neilan from Tortoise.